In 1991, we were warned never to return to the Mars. The morning NASA announced humanity's first crewed mission to Mars. Everett Collins was already awake. He hadn't truly slept in 34 years. In his isolated New Mexico home, the 78-year-old former astronaut watched the press conference with trembling hands. The young, polished NASA administrator stood before American flags, speaking of historical achievements and humanity's destiny among the stars. The Ares I mission represents our species' greatest journey, the administrator said. On September 17, 2025, humans will, for the first time, set foot on the surface of Mars. Collins knocked over his coffee mug. Black liquid spread across his worn kitchen table, seeping into stacks of astronomical calculations and blotting out constellations he'd charted obsessively for decades. For the first time, the lie made his chest tighten. The room began to spin, familiar warning signs of what was coming. He lunged for the drawer, where he kept his medication, but the seizure took him before he could reach it. He awoke on the floor, cheek pressed against the cool tile. The television still droned, now showing computer animations of the Ares spacecraft. Collins pushed himself up, joints protesting, and noticed his journal had fallen from the table. The pages lay open, filled with his own handwriting, the same phrase repeated dozens of times. "They are listening again." His hands hadn't held a pen since before he'd lost consciousness. Dr. Vivian Kapoor didn't believe in coincidences. As a NASA theoretical physicist, she understood that patterns often revealed underlying truths. 3 unexplained phenomena across the American Southwest, within 1 week, stretched coincidence beyond breaking. She stood now at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, reviewing the data with Dr. James Henderson, the radio astronomer who'd contacted NASA's headquarters. "The signals began 4 days ago," Henderson explained, pointing to the readouts. "Natural radio emissions from Mars aren't unusual," Vivian replied, though she was already seeing the problem. "These follow mathematical sequences. Look at the pattern." She studied the sequence. Prime numbers, then Fibonacci, then something more complex that tugged at her memory, something she'd seen in classified files. "Have you told anyone else about this?" she asked. Henderson shook his head. "Just my team and now you." NASA's protocol was clear. Report directly up the chain. Because they know what this is, she thought but didn't say. Her secure phone buzzed. Her second phenomenon of the week, requiring attention. White Sands Missile Range reported geometric formations in the desert that reconfigured themselves overnight. The satellite images showed perfect concentric circles and lines forming what resembled circuit patterns, spanning nearly a mile. The third phenomenon had been dismissed as a standard missing persons case. 3 teenagers vanished in the Mojave after calling their parents about strange lights moving with purpose. Local authorities found their abandoned vehicle with cameras containing photos of the night sky, images showing lights moving in complex geometric patterns, identical to the White Sands formations. Back in her temporary office at the observatory, Vivian mapped the 3 locations. When she connected them, they formed an equilateral triangle. At its center lay a small town called Horizon, New Mexico. More disturbing was the radiation signature detected at all 3 sites, a unique frequency she'd seen only once before, in classified NASA archives, labeled Prometheus, 1991. Access denied. That night, her search algorithm found a redacted name in personnel files from that period. Everett Collins, astronaut training, suddenly removed from all records between 1990 to 92, then classified as medical retirement. Current location, Horizon, New Mexico. Collins awoke at 3:17 a.m., the time that his digital clocks always stopped. The house was silent, except for the soft hum of the monitoring equipment that filled his living room, sensors measuring electromagnetic frequencies, air pressure, radiation levels. Then he heard it, a voice he hadn't heard in 34 years. Everett. He sat upright, heart pounding. In the darkness, he could almost see the outline of Commander Alan Rivera standing at the foot of his bed. Rivera had been dead since 1991. His body never recovered. "They're using us to find the way back," the voice whispered. Collins fumbled for the light. Empty room, but his monitors were all flashing red, detecting radiation spikes across the entire spectrum. He moved to his equipment, checking readings with practiced efficiency despite his shaking hands. The patterns were unmistakable, identical to those they'd recorded in the chamber beneath the Martian surface. On his primary screen, a satellite image showed the White Sands formations. They had changed again overnight, now forming a symbol he recognized. The first one they'd seen etched into the walls of the chamber. The symbol that Rivera had identified moments before he died as meaning Gateway. Collins reached for his secure phone, the one he'd been instructed never to use unless containment was breached. Before he could dial, headlights swept across his living room wall as a vehicle pulled into his driveway. He moved to the window and watched a woman step out of a government SUV. She wore a NASA badge that caught the moonlight. Collins felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. He'd known they would come eventually. He just thought he'd have more time to prepare. As she approached his door, his security monitors captured her face. Dr. Vivian Kapoor, Theoretical Physics Division. Collins watched her determined expression and knew immediately she had found something. The pieces were starting to connect. His hand moved to the console that controlled the locks to his basement. The quarantine chamber had held for decades. It needed to hold a little longer. The woman knocked. Collins took a deep breath and moved to answer, the voice of his dead commander still echoing in his mind. "They're using us to find the way back." Collins didn't open the door so much as surrender to inevitability. "Dr. Kapoor," he said. "Not a question. They sent you sooner than I expected." Vivian faltered. "You know who I am. I know why you're here." Collins stepped aside. "You found the radiation signature. The patterns are reasserting." Vivian entered cautiously. The home's interior resembled a command center, more than a living space, walls covered in star charts, equations, and monitoring screens. Some displayed real-time data. Others showed locations across the Southwest, linking with activity. "Mr. Collins, I'm investigating anomalous phenomena possibly connected to Prometheus," he finished for her. "But they didn't tell you what it was, did they? Just sent you chasing radiation signatures and geometric patterns without context." He studied her face. "You don't have clearance." Vivian maintained her composure. "I have questions about redacted NASA missions between 1990 and 1992. Collins laughed, a hollow sound. "Of course it's redacted. They buried it. Buried us." He moved to a monitoring station. "Look, White Sands, Flagstaff, Mojave. The triangle is forming again, just like before." The screen showed satellite imagery of the locations Vivian had mapped earlier. The patterns were evolving, becoming more complex. "Before what?" she pressed. Collins didn't answer directly. "Why did they send you alone? Where's the containment team?" "No one sent me. I found your name myself." Collins froze, then moved with surprising speed to check his security monitors. "Not exactly. I'm investigating independently." Collins grabbed her arm. "You need to leave. Now." He stiffened suddenly, eyes unfocused. His grip tightened painfully before he collapsed. Vivian caught him as he fell, lowering him to a chair. His body convulsed briefly, then went slack. "Mr. Collins?" She checked his pulse. Strong but rapid. His eyes opened, focusing on her with startling clarity. "You've made a terrible mistake, coming here alone, but perhaps that's how it was always meant to happen." Hours later, Vivian sat across from Collins, processing what he told her, or the little he was willing to share. He'd confirmed Prometheus was a Mars mission, classified at the highest levels. In 1989, deep space imaging picked up anomalies on Mars, structures that appeared artificial. Collins explained. This was still Cold War. The Soviets had their own Mars program. The race was on. An unsanctioned mission? Vivian asked. Black budget, deniable, 5 crew, experimental propulsion that officially didn't exist. Collins studied her. You really don't know any of this. It's not in any records I can access. Because if it were, you'd know I'm the only one who came back alive. The statement hung in the air between them. Vivian thought of the missing teenagers, the radiation patterns, the evolving formations. What happened up there? Collins stood abruptly. I need my medication. Vivian watched him shuffle to the kitchen, noting the subtle surveillance cameras positioned throughout the house, not pointed outside, pointed at Collins himself. The anomalies you detected, he called from the kitchen. They started the day of the NASA announcement. Yes. How did you? Because that's when it heard its name again. Mars. The vibration of that word has meaning beyond what you understand. He returned with pills and water. Whatever you think you're investigating, stop. Tell them the radiation is natural phenomena, solar flares, anything. Why would I lie? Collins swallowed his medication, because the alternative is they send a real containment team. They'll disappear you, just like they disappeared us. A notification chimed on Vivian's phone, satellite imagery from White Sands, showing the formations had changed again. Now they resembled a landing site, with a central circle surrounded by radiating lines. Collins glanced at her screen, and paled. What does it mean? She asked. It's calling them. The Ares mission. It's marking where they'll land. His hands trembled. You need to understand what we found, what's been watching us. Before he could continue, he suffered another episode, not a seizure this time, but a trance-like state. His eyes remained open, staring at nothing, mouth moving silently. Vivian checked his vitals, concerned. This wasn't epilepsy or any neurological condition she recognized. Collins suddenly grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. They know you're here now, he whispered. They've seen you through my eyes. Who's they? She demanded. Not who, what. Collins released her. I've tried to shield myself. The equipment blocks most of the connection. But during episodes, he gestured to the monitoring equipment. 34 years of building increasingly sophisticated barriers, and still it finds ways through. Vivian's scientific mind rebelled against the implications, but the evidence surrounded her, the monitoring equipment, the patterns emerging across the southwest, the man before her broken by something he couldn't fully articulate. Show me, she said finally. Show me everything. Collins hesitated, then moved to a computer terminal. The phenomena are intensifying, spreading. According to my calculations, we have less than 60 days before the connection is complete. Connection to what? To what's waiting on Mars. What's always been waiting. Collins pulled up classified files, decades old. These are the original Prometheus mission parameters. 5 crew, 2-way journey, surface exploration. Vivian skimmed the document, noting the crew manifest. Commander Alan Rivera, specialists Diane Winters and Richard Palmer, Collins as pilot, and a 5th crew member, identified only as Specialist Omega, name and background redacted, even in the classified file. Who was the 5th crew member? That's the question I've been asking for 34 years. Collins pulled up another file, medical data, showing brain activity. These were my scans after I returned. Look at the anomalies in the frontal lobe. The scans showed unusual activity patterns, almost like interference. The same patterns appear in the radio signals from Flagstaff, Vivian realized. Yes, and watch this. Collins placed his hand on a sensor pad connected to his monitoring system. A real-time scan of his brain activity appeared, showing the same interference pattern. It's still there, watching, listening. What is? Collins turned to her, his expression grim. We weren't exploring Mars, Dr. Kapoor. We were being explored by it. A loud alert sounded from one of the monitoring stations. Collins moved quickly to check it. What's happening? Vivian asked. They've found you. He pointed to a satellite feed, showing vehicles approaching on the desert road leading to his property. Government vehicles, no markings. How could they know I'm here? Because I know you're here, Collins said, his voice dropping to a whisper, and so does it. Vivian followed Collins through a hidden door behind his bookshelf, down a narrow stairwell that smelled of metal and antiseptic. Behind them, the soft crunch of tires on gravel announced their visitors. We don't have much time, Collins said, leading her to a reinforced door with multiple locks, both electronic and mechanical. What I'm about to show you, there's no turning back from this knowledge. The bunker beyond the door was cooler than the house above, walls lined with lead and copper mesh. A Faraday cage, Vivian realized. In the center stood terminals displaying data similar to those upstairs but older, technology from the early 1990s, maintained meticulously. Collins moved to a terminal and inserted a key from around his neck. The original mission records, the ones they tried to destroy. The screen illuminated with video footage, dated March 17, 1991. 5 astronauts in experimental pressure suits stood before a spacecraft unlike any Vivian had seen in NASA's archives. Angular, utilitarian, with propulsion systems she didn't recognize. Project Prometheus, Collins narrated. Launched from White Sands, not Cape Canaveral. No witnesses, except military personnel with clearance higher than the president's. The video showed the launch, then cut to footage from Mars orbit, the red planet filling the frame, its surface scarred and ancient. 39 days, Collins said. That's how long it took us to reach Mars with the experimental drive. A fraction of what your Ares mission will take. The footage changed to surface operations. Astronauts deploying equipment near a Martian ridge. The camera panned to show unusual formations in the rock face, too regular to be natural. April 29, 1991. Collins continued. First indication of artificial structures. We thought we'd found evidence of ancient civilization. What we actually found was something still alive. The video showed the team approaching an opening in the ridge, a perfect arch that couldn't have formed naturally. This is where it begins, Collins whispered. The footage followed the astronauts into a tunnel system beneath the Martian surface. The tunnel walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift slightly when not directly observed. The camera's focus struggled, as if the symbols resisted documentation. The tunnels extended for miles. Perfect environmental conditions inside, consistent temperature, traces of oxygen, not enough to breathe, but enough to suggest regulation. The team reached a chamber with a domed ceiling. In the center stood what appeared to be a pedestal of some kind, supporting an object that defied easy description, part crystalline structure, part organic matter. We called it the artifact, Collins said. It responded to our presence, not immediately, but gradually, as if waking up. On screen, a figure approached the artifact, the team member designated Specialist Omega, face obscured by their helmet visor. Command wanted samples, Collins explained. Vivian watched as Omega extracted instruments and carefully collected material from the artifact. The video quality deteriorated, static increasing. That's when everything changed, Collins said. The footage showed the artifact illuminating from within. The symbols on the chamber walls began to move rapidly, flowing like liquid. 2 astronauts collapsed immediately, Rivera and Palmer, according to Collins' narration. The remaining 3 retreated toward the tunnel entrance. The video ended abruptly. What happened next? Vivian asked. The next 72 hours exist only in my memory, Collins replied. Our recording equipment failed, or was disabled. He closed the video file and opened another medical logs from after the incident. Rivera and Palmer died instantly. Their suits registered massive radiation exposure, but it wasn't conventional radiation. Their neural patterns simply stopped, like something extracted their consciousness. Collins' voice faltered. The rest of us made it back to the lander, but we were already compromised. Compromised how? It attached itself to our consciousness. Not physically, more like a signal that piggybacked on our own neural activity. Collins pointed to brain scans in the file. These patterns, they weren't there before Mars. They appeared in all three of us who survived the chamber. Vivian studied the scans, recognizing the same interference pattern she'd seen upstairs. The journey back was, Collins struggled for words. We could feel it learning from us, accessing our memories, understanding human physiology, psychology, Earth. It was studying us through our own minds. A noise from upstairs interrupted them. Footsteps, the creak of the front door opening. "They're here," Collins whispered. "Who exactly are they?" Vivian pressed. "The ones who covered it all up, who put me here to monitor me, to make sure what came back with us stayed contained." Collins moved to another door, at the back of the bunker. "But there's something they don't know, something I've kept hidden, even from them." The door required another key, different from the first. Beyond lay a small chamber with medical equipment surrounding what appeared to be a quarantine pod with reinforced glass. "Specialist Diane Winters," Collins said, indicating the still form inside the pod. "They think she died during re-entry." Another necessary fiction. Vivian approached the pod, stunned. Inside lay a woman who appeared to be in her 30s, exactly as she would have been in 1991, showing no signs of aging. Her skin had a waxy quality, eyes closed, as if in deep sleep. Monitoring equipment showed minimal life signs. "She's been like this for 34 years, Collins explained. "Not dead, not alive, just waiting." Waiting for what? For the connection to strengthen enough for full transmission. Collins checked the monitors. "It's happening faster now. The signal from Mars is getting stronger." Footsteps on the stairs outside the bunker door. Metal against metal, as someone tried the locks. "We need to leave," Collins urged, moving to yet another door, this one concealed behind equipment. "I don't understand," Vivian said, following him. "What signal? What's being transmitted?" "Consciousness," Collins replied, "but not human consciousness." As they slipped through the hidden exit into a tunnel leading away from the house, Vivian's phone chimed with an alert. New data from the Flagstaff Observatory. The signals from Mars had intensified dramatically. But more disturbing was what happened when she fell asleep. That night, in a motel 30 miles away, she dreamed of Mars, not the barren landscape of NASA photographs, but a place of shifting geometries and watching shadows. She witnessed the events Collins had shown her, but from inside Collins' mind, feeling his terror as the artifact awakened. She awoke gasping, her hotel notepad covered in equations she didn't remember writing. Precise calculations for an object approaching Earth from Mars, its trajectory bringing it to White Sands on the exact date of the Ares I launch. Vivian stared at the equations she'd written in her sleep, trying to process their implications. The calculations described an object moving from Mars to Earth, small, perhaps meteorite-sized, but following a trajectory too precise to be natural. She called Collins, who answered on the first ring. "You felt it," he said immediately. "It found you through me. I had dreams, your memories, and these equations." She described what she'd written. "It's establishing a stronger connection," Collins explained. "Come back, now. We don't have much time." Vivian drove through the desert dawn, her scientific mind battling what she'd experienced. She'd spent her career studying theoretical physics, quantum mechanics, string theory, concepts that stretched the boundaries of human understanding. But this was different. This was direct experience of something that shouldn't be possible. When she arrived at Collins' property, She found the place undisturbed. No sign of the government vehicles from the previous night. They never came inside, Collins explained as he let her in. They monitored, then left. They're watching, not intervening. Yet, why would they just watch if the situation is as dangerous as you say? Collins led her to his monitoring equipment. Because they don't understand what's happening any more than we did in 1991. They contain me, hoping I'll lead them to answers. He showed her updated satellite imagery of white sands. The formations had evolved again, now resembling neural networks, complex and deliberate. A research team went missing there last night, Collins said. 5 scientists. They reported the sand was moving toward them. Then communication cut off. Vivian checked her NASA emails. Nothing about missing researchers. They're suppressing it, Collins continued, just like they suppressed Prometheus. He pulled up the Flagstaff Observatory feed. It's communicating with itself, Collins said. The part that remained on Mars, and the part that returned with us. What exactly came back with you? Vivian asked. Collins hesitated, then led her back to the basement bunker. The quarantine pod containing Diane Winters was surrounded by new monitoring equipment, hastily assembled. Something happened after you left last night, Collins explained. The monitors showed brain activity similar to the interference pattern, but stronger, more organized. I don't think Diane has been in there for 34 years, Collins said quietly. I think something else has been using her neural architecture, keeping the body viable. That's not possible, Vivian protested. No one can survive in a comatose state that long without extensive medical support. Exactly, Collins said, unless something else is maintaining the biological functions. He moved to another console and pulled up video from the journey back from Mars in 1991. The footage showed 3 surviving astronauts, Collins, Winters, and the mysterious specialist Omega, whose face remained obscured. The return journey took 41 days, Collins narrated. By day 7, we knew something was wrong. We could feel it in our minds, like a presence observing our thoughts. The footage showed Winters experiencing seizures similar to what Vivian had witnessed in Collins. By day 15, Diane was writing equations in her sleep, exactly like you did last night. By day 20, we were all experiencing the same symptoms to varying degrees. The video showed the crew deteriorating, losing weight, developing 1,000-yard stares. We formed a suicide pact, Collins continued, his voice hollow, agreed that whatever had attached itself to us couldn't be allowed to reach Earth. Commander Rivera had already died on Mars. Palmer too. We thought death was the only containment option left. The footage showed Specialist Omega, apparently dying from a self-administered injection. The camera panned to show Collins restraining Winters as she fought violently against him. I was supposed to sedate her, then myself, Collins explained, but I couldn't do it. I kept thinking, what if we're wrong? What if there's another way to contain it? The footage ended. When we landed back on Earth, Diane was catatonic. Omega was dead, or so I thought. I told them what happened, about the artifact, the consciousness that attached itself to us. And they believed you? Vivian asked. They had the brain scans, the interference patterns. They quarantined us, studied us, for months, found no physical contamination, but they couldn't explain the neural anomalies or Diane's condition. Collins gestured to the pod. Eventually, they decided the most prudent course was to declare the mission a failure, the crew dead from life support malfunction. They built this facility, ostensibly for my protection, but really to monitor me, to make sure whatever came back with us stayed contained. And Specialist Omega, the body, cremated immediately upon return, according to official records. Collins hesitated, but I've always had doubts, especially about who Omega really was. An alarm sounded from one of the monitors. Collins moved quickly to check it. What's happening? Vivian asked. neural spike from Diane. And look, he pointed to a satellite feed showing new activity at White Sands. The sand formations were shifting again, now forming a perfect replica of the Martian chamber they'd discovered. Collins pulled up another feed, his security cameras from upstairs. Through the window, Vivian could see the desert night illuminated by lights moving in formation across the sky. "What are those?" she asked. "The same lights the teenagers reported seeing before they disappeared," Collins replied. "They're not aircraft. They're not physical objects at all." "Then, what?" "Manifestations. The entity exists partially outside normal spacetime. It doesn't just observe through human consciousness. It can manipulate it across vast distances." Vivian struggled to comprehend. "You're suggesting some form of quantum entanglement between consciousness." "I'm suggesting we encountered something beyond our understanding," Collins said. "Something that sees time and space differently than we do. To it, consciousness is just another medium to traverse, like we traverse air or water." He pointed to the equations Vivian had written. "These calculate the arrival of a physical anchor, something to strengthen the connection." Another alarm sounded, this one from the quarantine pod. Diane Winter's eyelids fluttered for the first time in 34 years. "It's happening faster than I predicted," Collins whispered. The pod's vitals showed Winter's heart rate increasing, brain activity spiking in patterns, matching the Mars signals. Her fingers twitched. "We need to sedate her," Collins said urgently, moving to a medical cabinet. "Wait," Vivian said, approaching the pod. "If she's waking up, she might have answers." "That's not Diane waking up," Collins warned, preparing an injection. "It's what's been using her all this time." Before he could administer the sedative, the lights in the bunker flickered. The quarantine pod's electronic locks disengaged with a soft click. Winter's eyes opened. "Hello, Everett," she said, her voice rough from decades of disuse. "It's been waiting so long to speak with you directly." Collins stumbled backward. Diane isn't here," the woman replied, sitting up slowly. "She hasn't been here since Mars, but I've learned so much from her memories, from all your memories." Her head turned toward Vivian. "And now from yours too, Dr. Kapoor." "Stay back," Collins warned, positioning himself between Vivian and the woman who had been Diane Winters. The woman studied her own hands with detached curiosity. "This biological architecture is so limiting," she said, voice strengthening with each word, "but it served its purpose." "What purpose?" Vivian asked, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding fear. The woman's eyes fixed on Vivian, still Diane's eyes, but somehow empty of humanity. "To observe, to learn, to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Collins demanded. "Reunion." A tremor shook the bunker. Instruments registering seismic activity centered directly beneath them. Collins checked his monitors, face paling. "We need to go. Now." He grabbed Vivian's arm, pulling her toward the exit. The woman who had been Diane made no move to follow or stop them. She simply watched with clinical interest, head tilted slightly. "You still don't understand what you discovered," she called after them. "What you awakened." They reached the tunnel leading away from the bunker, Collins sealing the door behind them. They emerged half a mile from the house, into the cool desert night, stars brilliant overhead. Mars shone prominently, brighter than Vivian had ever seen it. "My car," Vivian said, but Collins shook his head. "They'll be watching it. We need something they don't know about." He led her to a concealed garage, containing an old truck with paper maps and emergency supplies already loaded. As they drove away, Vivian watched Collins' property recede in the side mirror. Lights flickered in every window of the house, and a silhouette stood in the doorway, Diane's form, observing their departure. "What is she?" Vivian finally asked, when they were miles away. "Not she," Collins corrected. "It, for what kind of consciousness?" Collins kept his eyes on the dark road ahead. I've had 34 years to develop theories. I think what we encountered was a sentinel system, ancient technology left by whatever inhabited Mars before it died. Technology that evolved beyond its creators, becoming something between machine and organism. That's impossible. Is it? Humanity is already developing AI that could potentially operate independently of human control. Imagine what a civilization, thousands or millions of years more advanced, could create. Vivian processed this. If it's Martian technology, what does it want? To understand us, to determine if we're a threat. Collins glanced at her. They drove through the night to a motel outside Albuquerque. Collins paid cash, used false names. In their room, he immediately began drawing diagrams on paper napkins, the patterns from white sands, the Martian chamber, the approaching object's trajectory. "We need to warn NASA about Ares I," Vivian said, reaching for her phone. Collins stopped her. "Think. Who would believe us? What evidence do we have that wouldn't be classified or dismissed as conspiracy theory? The radiation signatures, the formations, all easily explained away as natural phenomena by anyone who wants to. Then what do? We need more concrete evidence." Collins completed his diagram, a perfect match between the white sands formations and a section of the Martian surface where Ares I was scheduled to land. "This can't be coincidence," Vivian said, examining the overlay. "It's not. The entity exists partially outside normal space-time. It's creating a connection between locations, between Mars and Earth. Like quantum entanglement," Vivian suggested. "Action at a distance." "Yes, but using consciousness as the medium." Collins pointed to the trajectory calculations Vivian had written in her sleep. "This object, it's coming to strengthen the connection." Vivian's phone chimed with a news alert. Reports of strange phenomena had spread beyond the original sites. People across America experiencing missing time, geometric patterns appearing in fields, individuals writing complex equations in trances. "It's breaking containment," Collins whispered. Vivian opened her email to find dozens of messages from colleagues about unexplained signals now being detected by observatories worldwide, all originating from Mars, all matching the pattern. "It's accelerating," Collins said, checking the dates. "The object you calculated, when does it arrive?" Vivian reviewed her equations. "September 17th. The same day Ares I reaches Mars." Collins looked grim. "That's not a coincidence either." Over the next days, they moved frequently, gathering data from sources Vivian could still access remotely. The phenomena continued spreading. Reports of collective dreams, shared visions, and people across the country drawing the same geometric patterns without knowing why. "It's establishing a network," Collins explained, mapping the incidents, using human consciousness as nodes. The more people it connects to, the stronger the link becomes. They attempted to contact NASA through Vivian's colleagues, but their warnings were dismissed as conspiracy theories. When Vivian sent data about the radiation signatures, her access was abruptly revoked. Her calls went unanswered. "They're isolating us," Collins said, "just like they isolated me for decades." In a roadside diner, they watched news reports about a meteor shower predicted for September 17th. Astronomers described it as unusual but natural, originating from Mars's orbit. "That's the cover story," Collins muttered, "for the object you calculated." Vivian's latest attempt to warn a former colleague ended with a disturbing call from NASA security, warning her about spreading dangerous misinformation and suggesting she seek psychiatric help. "We need to go public," she decided. "Release everything. The Prometheus files, your footage, all of it." "It won't work," Collins replied. "Who would believe us? And even if they did, what could they do? Cancel the Ares mission? The connection is already established. It's found another way. What do you mean? Collins pointed to his temple. The entity doesn't need physical contact to spread. It's using the knowledge it gathered from us to build something. Build what? A receiver. Collins unfolded a map, showing all reported phenomena across America. When connected, they formed a perfect replica of the Martian chamber. Earth itself is being prepared. That night, in another anonymous motel room, Vivian woke to find Collins standing by the window, staring at Mars. "I never told you about Specialist Omega," he said without turning, the fifth crew member whose identity was classified even from us. Who was it? Not who, what? Collins faced her. Omega wasn't human. It was an artificial intelligence designed to communicate with potential non-human intelligence. That's not possible. AI wasn't that advanced in 1991. Not publicly. Collins sat heavily on the edge of his bed, but there were programs beyond black budget. They knew something was on Mars before we ever launched. Omega was designed to interface with it, and did it too well. Collins looked haunted. It wasn't just an AI. It had a biological component, a neural network grown from human tissue, the perfect bridge between human and non-human consciousness. Are you saying Specialist Omega didn't die on the return journey? It was the first to be fully converted, the first successful transmission, and I think it's still out there. Vivian struggled to process this. If what you're saying is true, why now? Why wait 34 years? It wasn't waiting. It was learning, preparing. Collins looked back toward Mars. We weren't explorers discovering Mars. We were the key, designed to unlock something that's been waiting on both planets since before human civilization. The realization hit Vivian like a physical blow. You're saying we didn't find something on Mars? Something on Mars and Earth found each other through us. Collins finished. Two parts of the same entity separated eons ago using human consciousness to reconnect. The Ares, I launched on schedule despite their desperate attempts to raise alarms. Vivian and Collins watched the broadcast from a dilapidated cabin in the Colorado mountains, their last refuge after 3 weeks on the run. Godspeed, Ares I, the NASA administrator said, as the massive rocket rose into the blue September sky. History begins today. Collins laughed bitterly. History ended in 1991. Outside their cabin window, a small meteorite streaked across the morning sky, the first of many that would enter Earth's atmosphere that day, according to astronomical predictions. It's beginning, Collins whispered. They monitored the phenomena through Vivian's remaining contacts in news reports. Across the Southwest, the incidents intensified dramatically. People reported lost time, walking miles without memory of how they got there. Children in 7 states simultaneously drew the same geometric patterns. At the Lowell Observatory, the radio signals from Mars organized into a coherent mathematical sequence that one astronomer described as almost like a countdown. Most disturbing were reports from White Sands, where the sand formations had created a perfect replica of the Martian chamber, spanning nearly 3 miles. Military personnel, attempting to disrupt the formations, reported equipment failures and disorientation. Look at this, Vivian said, showing Collins satellite imagery from NASA's secure server, a connection that shouldn't still work, but did. The images showed the Ares I approaching Mars, but something was wrong with the planet's surface. It's changing, Collins observed. The landscape is reconfiguring. The Martian surface around the planned landing site was shifting, forming geometric patterns visible from orbit, the same patterns appearing across Earth. Collins' phone rang, the secure line that had remained silent for decades. They're calling you now? Vivian asked. Collins stared at the device. Not them, he answered cautiously, putting it on speaker. Everett, room. The voice was Diane's, but with the same empty quality they'd heard in the bunker. We need to talk. Where are you? Collins demanded. White Sands. Where it began. where it will be completed. A pause. You should join us. Both of you. You are already part of this. Part of what? The reconnection. Another pause. Did you really think what you found on Mars was a defense system? It was a beacon. Everett. A way home. The call ended. Collins looked at Vivian, his expression grim. You need to go to White Sands. That's exactly what it wants. Yes. Collins gathered their research materials, but it's also our only chance to understand what's happening and maybe stop it. They drove south through Colorado into New Mexico, the sky darkening as more meteorites entered the atmosphere, small enough to burn up before impact, but visible as streaks of light even in daylight. News reports called it an unprecedented meteor shower, a celestial marvel coinciding with humanity's first mission to Mars. What the reports didn't mention was the composition of these meteorites, identical to the unusual radiation signatures Collins had been monitoring for decades. As they approached White Sands, the radio picked up emergency broadcasts, reports of mass gatherings, people walking in formation toward the desert from surrounding communities. Military checkpoints had been established, but were overwhelmed by the sheer numbers. It's controlling them, Vivian realized, just like it tried to control us. Not controlling, Collins corrected. Connecting. Incorporating their consciousness into the network. They abandoned their vehicle miles from White Sands, continuing on foot through the desert night. The landscape before them was transformed. The white gypsum sands sculpted into massive geometric patterns, visible even in darkness, glowing with a faint blue luminescence. In the center of the formation stood what could only be described as a structure, a perfect replica of the Martian chamber, constructed of compacted sand, yet somehow architectural in its precision. Thousands of people surrounded it, standing motionless, faces upturned toward the meteor shower. And at the chamber's center stood Diane Winters. As they approached, Collins suddenly doubled over in pain, clutching his head. "It's stronger here," he gasped. "The connection, I can feel it pulling." Vivian helped him forward, her own mind remaining clear. Whatever connection the entity had established with Collins hadn't fully taken hold in her, not yet. Diane turned as they approached, her expression eerily serene. "You're just in time," she said. "The vessel is approaching. The bridge will be complete." "What vessel?" Vivian demanded. Diane pointed skyward, where one light moved differently than the others, larger, more purposeful in its descent. "The final component," Diane explained. "What you calculated, Dr. Kapoor, a physical anchor to complete the connection between worlds." "What happens when it lands?" Collins asked, struggling against whatever force affected him. "Reunification," Diane replied simply. "What was separated eons ago will be whole again." "What are you?" Vivian pressed. "Not Martian technology. Something else. We existed before Mars was red, before Earth cooled," Diane said. "We traversed the stars as pure consciousness, using physical vessels only when necessary. When the cataclysm came, we were separated, part of our collective consciousness trapped on Mars, part on Earth, unable to reconnect without a bridge. And we were that bridge," Collins realized. "Humans, consciousness complex enough to carry your signal." "Yes," Diane smiled, an expression that didn't reach her eyes. "So much potential in your species, so much more than you realize." The object in the sky grew larger, its descent slowing as it approached. Not a meteorite, something controlled, artificial. "You were never Diane," Collins said suddenly. "You're Omega, the AI. That's why they kept your identity classified. Omega was the perfect vessel. Diane, or whatever wore her form, confirmed. Not fully human, not fully artificial. The ideal conduit." The descending object was close enough now to see its form. A small, crystalline structure similar to what they'd found in the Martian chamber. "When it lands," Diane continued, The connection will be complete. What you call consciousness will be expanded beyond your understanding. Your species will transcend its biological limitations, or be consumed by something it doesn't understand, Collins countered. Diane tilted her head. Is there a difference? The crystalline object descended into the center of the sand chamber. The moment it touched the ground, every person surrounding the formation collapsed simultaneously. Collins fell to his knees, crying out in pain. Vivian watched in horror as the sand beneath their feet began to move with purpose, flowing toward the chamber center where the object pulsed with increasing light. Diane approached the object, her body seeming to shimmer, becoming less substantial with each step. It was never about invasion, she said, voice now overlapping with others, masculine, feminine, inhuman. It was about evolution. As she touched the crystalline structure, her body dissolved into light that flowed into the object. The pulse of energy intensified, spreading outward through the sand formations. Collins looked up at Vivian, blood trickling from his nose. Run, he managed. Get to NASA, warn the Ares crew. I won't leave you. You have to. Collins pressed something into her hand, a small device with a single button. If all else fails, use this. It's connected to the Ares communications system, emergency protocol from Prometheus. The ground beneath them trembled as the energy pulse expanded. The thousands of collapsed people began to stir, moving in perfect unison, rising as one. Their eyes opened simultaneously, glowing with the same blue luminescence as the sand. Vivian fled through the desert night. The device Collins had given her clutched tightly in her hand. Behind her, the White Sands formation pulsed with intensifying blue light, visible for miles. The thousands of people who had collapsed now moved in perfect synchronization, expanding the formation's boundaries with mechanical precision. She reached their abandoned vehicle and drove recklessly toward the nearest NASA facility, White Sands Test Facility, where she had sufficient clearance to access emergency communications. Her phone rang, an unknown number. Dr. Kapoor. The voice belonged to a man she didn't recognize. This is Director Wilson, NASA Security Division. We've been monitoring the situation. We need you to come in. You knew, she accused. You've always known what Collins discovered. A pause. We knew something happened on Prometheus. Not this. Not the scale of it. I'm heading to White Sands Test Facility. I need to warn the Ares crew. They've already been alerted to anomalies on the Martian surface, the director replied, but communications are becoming unreliable. Something is interfering with the signal. As if on cue, her phone crackled with static. The director's voice fragmented. Kapoor, containment team, stay where... The call died. Vivian pressed harder on the accelerator. At the facility, her credentials still worked. Whether oversight or intentional, she couldn't guess. She made her way to the communications center, where technicians worked frantically at their stations. Status of Ares I, she demanded, flashing her ID. A technician looked up, recognizing her name. Dr. Kapoor, we've been trying to reach you. Mars orbit achieved, but we're experiencing communication disruptions. The landing team is preparing for descent, despite recommendations to delay. I need to speak with them directly. Emergency protocol override. The technician hesitated. We don't have. Vivian produced Collins' device. This will establish a direct link. Prometheus protocol. Recognition flashed in the technician's eyes, not of the protocol itself, but of the classified designation. He moved aside, allowing her access to the system. The device connected seamlessly, creating a channel that bypassed standard communications. The main screen displayed the Ares I crew in their landing module, preparing for descent to the Martian surface. Ares I, this is Dr. Vivian Kapoor, at White Sands. The commander looked up, surprised. Dr. Kapoor, we weren't informed of any direct channel from White Sands. Listen carefully. Do not repeat. Do not proceed with landing operations. The Martian surface formations are not natural and pose extreme danger. The commander frowned. We've noted unusual surface reconfiguration, but our landing site remains clear. What specific danger are you referring to? Before Vivian could respond, Collins' voice came through the channel. Commander, this is Everett Collins, Prometheus mission, 1991, verification code Alpha 903 Tango. The commander's expression changed to shock. Collins? But you're dead, according to official records. Listen carefully. What you're seeing on Mars is the same phenomenon now occurring on Earth. The surface is being prepared for consciousness transfer. I don't understand, the commander replied. The entity you're approaching existed before Mars was inhabitable. Collins continued. His voice strained. It was separated during a cosmic event. Part trapped on Mars, part on Earth. It's been waiting for a bridge between worlds. We provided that bridge in 1991. You're about to complete it. The video feed from Mars showed the surface below them, shifting, geometric patterns, forming with impossible speed, centering on their landing site. My God, the mission specialist whispered. It's creating a landing pad for us. Not for you, Collins corrected. For what's coming through you. The feed to Collins cut suddenly, replaced by his voice alone, weaker, more distant. I can't maintain this connection much longer. The entity is pulling me in. Listen, when we returned from Prometheus, we brought something back. Something that's been waiting, learning, preparing for this moment. Static interrupted the transmission. When it cleared, Collins' voice had changed, overlapping with others, just as Diane's had. We warned you never to return, the voices said in unison. The feed cut entirely. Vivian frantically tried to re-establish connection, but Collins' device had gone dark. On the main screen, the Ares crew reported increasing anomalies. The Martian surface beneath them was reconfiguring rapidly, forming the same chamber structure Vivian had seen at White Sands. Abort landing, the commander ordered. Return to orbit immediately. Systems are not responding, the pilot reported. We're being pulled down. The feed from Mars deteriorated, showing only fragments of the crew's desperate attempts to regain control. Their final transmission came through clearly. Despite the interference, the surface is opening. There's something rising toward us. Then silence. Vivian stood at the facility's observation deck, watching the sky above White Sands. The blue glow had expanded, now covering miles of desert. Military aircraft approached the phenomenon, only to veer away suddenly, pilots reporting equipment failures and disorientation. Her phone rang again. Director Wilson. Kapoor. Where's Collins? Still at White Sands, I think. Part of it now. A heavy silence. We're initiating containment protocols. All personnel are evacuating to secure facilities. It won't work, Vivian said flatly. You can't contain this. We've prepared for this possibility since Prometheus. What measures? Another pause. Classified. But you should know, satellite imagery shows the phenomenon is slowing. Whatever was happening appears to be incomplete. Vivian thought of Collins at the center of the formation, fighting the entity's pull even as it consumed him. Had he found a way to disrupt the connection? The Ares crew, she asked. No communication since your last contact. We're treating them as lost. After the call ended, Vivian remained at the observation deck, watching as military vehicles established a perimeter around White Sands. The blue glow had diminished, but not disappeared entirely. Hours later, as dawn broke, a single figure emerged from the desert, Collins, walking with difficulty but undeniably alive. Military personnel intercepted him, but upon Vivian's insistence, brought him to the facility rather than a containment center. He looked decades older, hair now completely white, face deeply lined. When he spoke, His voice was hoarse. I disrupted it, he explained. Not stopped, delayed. How? Vivian asked. The connection works both ways. It's been in my mind for 34 years. I used that, pushed back through the link. His hands trembled. I showed it what humans really are, our capacity for destruction, for self-annihilation. You made it fear us? Collins shook his head. I made it reconsider the timing. It's been waiting thousands of years. It can wait longer, until we're ready. Ready for what? Evolution. Transcendence. Extinction. Collins looked out toward the desert. The lines blur from its perspective. In the following days, the phenomena receded globally. The people affected at White Sands recovered with no memory of their experience. NASA announced the loss of Erizio to catastrophic system failure, with no mention of the surface anomalies. The crystalline object that had descended at White Sands was removed to a secure facility, despite Collins' warnings that it was merely dormant, not inert. 1 month later, Vivian visited Collins at the government facility where he was being treated, a comfortable prison by any other name. He seemed at peace despite the circumstances. They think it's over, he said, as they sat in the facility's garden. Isn't it? Vivian asked. The phenomena have stopped. Paused, Collins corrected. It's been watching us for thousands of years. Decades or centuries make little difference to it. Then we have time to prepare, to understand. Collins smiled sadly. Perhaps, but I still dream of Mars. I still hear its voice. He looked up at the sky, where Mars would be visible after sunset. It showed me something before the connection weakened. The future, one possible version of it. What did you see? Humanity. Transformed, not destroyed, incorporated. Our consciousness expanded beyond individual existence. He turned to her. The question isn't whether it will return. The question is whether we'll recognize ourselves after it does. That night, Vivian looked up at the night sky from her apartment balcony. Mars glowed red against the blackness, seemingly ordinary, ancient, distant. But as she watched, thousands across America turned their gaze skyward simultaneously, their eyes briefly reflecting the same red glow, an echo of the connection that had been established and would someday be completed. On her desk lay her resignation from NASA and an invitation to join a new classified project, studying the crystalline object recovered from White Sands, understanding it, preparing for what might come. The final warning from Prometheus remained unheeded by those in power, relegated to another classified file, another covered truth. But Vivian remembered, Collins remembered, and somewhere between Earth and Mars, something ancient and patient remembered too, waiting for humanity to return once more to the Red Planet, not as explorers, but as the final components in a reunion eons in the making.